morning, bonjour, buenos dias, sin ciao, ni hao. What's up? Today we're going to be looking at chapter 7. So without further ado, let's get started. The summary of chapter 7 is actually a series of flashbacks. So we start out with this being the first chapter in a new section, section 3, titled Night. The narrator tells us the night is her time. In literal fact, she's in the bedroom, but she has 3 flashbacks. The first flashback is to her college dorm where she's with her best friend Moira, and they're kind of hanging out, having fun, telling some stories. Second flashback, Offred is walking with her mother to the park, and when they arrive at the park, there's this kind of terrifying scene. There's a crowd, and they're having a book burning, and they ask Offred, or the young narrator as a child, to take a magazine and to throw it into the flames, so to literally chuck it into the bonfire. Third flashback is the worst. The narrator, Offred, is remembering her daughter being taken from her. She has these sort of thoughts of like the hospital and the syringe, and wonders ultimately if her daughter's been killed. Let's get into the deeper stuff, the line-by-line reading of chapter 7. The narrator, Offred, she tells us the nighttime is her time. It's when it's mine, right? She uses the possessive. And she starts to define the difference between lie and lay. And she talks about how the word to lay is literally passive, and then she references sex and this idea of to get laid. And then we can also infer between the line that to lie, an active verb, is to be a liar, right? To be her own creator of a story, to say what she wants to say, and also less to break the rules or to supersede the literal meaning of Gilead. She says she's like to get laid. She's obviously referring to this yearning and the desire and the physical needs of her body and the emotional needs of being loved that keep coming up. She also tells us that she's looking up at the ceiling, at the plaster eye in the ceiling. And so again, there's this idea that wherever she goes, even when she's alone, even when it is her time, she's being watched, right? And this is this reference, the throwback to George Orwell, to 1984, to Big Brother, to the eye in the sky. The narrator then asks us, where should I go? And presumably, as she told us before, the only place she can go is to her memories, to this beautiful past and nostalgia that exists in her mind. This sets up a series of 3 flashbacks. So in the first one, she's with her friend, Moira, her best friend, and they're hanging out in the college dorm. They're sort of, having this light, easy-go-lucky, fun moment. Moira's smoking, she's carefree. It's a very laissez-faire, do as you please, time at a liberal arts college. But then Moira sort of mentions writing a paper on date rape. And the date rape is compared to something French, like the sound of it, like a dot râpé or something, that's maybe a dessert. Atwood, or the narrator, is making light or making fun of it, not wanting to take this idea seriously. But it's also a turning point where her positive dream kind of dips into the negative. And this brings us to the second flashback with her mother, where it starts out, they're going for a walk in the park, going to see the ducks in the pond. So maybe an allusion to The Catcher in the Rye and Holden Caulfield's kind of his loss of innocence, where he was always thinking about the ducks in the pond and where did they go and yada yada. But we see in a much clearer picture how Offred loses her innocence. When she's on this walk with her mother, they come across a group of people who are chanting and standing around a bonfire, and as they approach, we realize that the bonfire is actually a pile of books. So real obvious shades of censorship and to the freedom of press in America, a book burning, right? So you can picture this scene. The flames are rising up. There's chanting, like a tradition or a custom, some sort of horrible rite of passage. And then someone actually invites the narrator's character, the little girl, to throw a magazine into the flames. And when she throws the magazine into the flames, first she sees it and sees that it's a magazine depicting a woman's body, a sort of scantily clad lady. Presumably it's some sort of, pornography. Atwood flips this and uses this image to create in the reader's mind's eye an image of actual bodies burning, of women being burned at the stake in the Salem witch trial. I'm going to read to you the quote here. Big flakes of paper came loose, sailed into the air, still on fire, parts of women's bodies turning to black ash in the air before my eyes. It's really unsettling. Deeply scarring, horrifying image. We've gone very quickly from inside the college dorm room of two 20-something young ladies having a good time to this like scarring image of her childhood. And from these shades of the Holocaust or witch burnings, we immediately flash back again to what is now a true nightmare, like a true scene of horror. And Offred, at this low point, the worst case scenario, she's in some sort of hospital or institution. There's needles, there's interns, there's people talking around her. And she's telling these people, you've killed her, you've killed my daughter. We can see that this idea Offred had or suggested that the only place she can hide is in her mind, and that she can see the beautiful things of the past, is not actually the case. When she goes to her mind too has now been narrowed in scope, and she's left only with the horrible images, the after image or the afterthoughts of this war, right? She's scarred. She's got a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. Atwood ends with this little piece on storytelling. The narrator is essentially saying to us that she has no control over her own story. If she could be the author of her life, then she would have some say. Remember, this chapter started with this idea about lying, right? So to lie, to make up a story, is to be active, to create your own fiction. But she's telling us now that she knows she needs an audience. She needs a you for her story to be heard, and she doesn't have that you. So she ends with a really kind of creepy, scary, powerful quote. I'll pretend you can hear me, but it's no good, because I know you can't. And we don't know if that you is us, or Luke, or Moira, or her daughter. But we essentially know that Offred has been muted. Her voice has been taken from her. Let's do some quick vocabulary. Eccentric. We're told Moira's eccentric. What does that mean? It means she's a little bit different, a little bit out of the ordinary, a little bit off. So if we flash back to our last chapter, which finished with this idea of ordinary, and then in this chapter we start with Moira, the eccentric, the different, the strange, the opposite of commonplace. Extravagant means lacking in restraint or overspending, too much money, almost like frivolous or excessive. In this reference, the extravagance is the books lying on the floor of their college dorm. So just looking back, this time of being able to read whatever you want, of having the freedom to choose between all these books, that they could just be strewn about extravagantly. And this, of course, is an immediate foreshadowing of the book burning that's coming in the next flashback. So we're told the book burners, this horde or mass or group of people gathering in the park, is ecstatic. So to be in ecstasy means pure, physical, joyful. But it can also mean transcendent, right? It can be like leaving the physical body and going up into this like higher consciousness, a transcendent moment. So they experience this sort of group think, collective bliss. Riffle, she uses to riffle, and it's the magazines that they're burning and the books they're burning that are riffled. So they're quickly passed over or flipped through. To riffle through something is to lightly disturb the surface of it. That is a wrap on Chapter 7. We will be back shortly with Chapter 8 of The Handmaid's Tale, where we will do another quick recap, some more line-by-line analysis, and then finish with the vocabulary again. Thanks so much.